You mentioned earlier that you were in North Korea before.
Yeah.
So at first, I just have a question. How do you even get into the country? Because I thought that, for example, now since we're in South Korea, I have heard from friends that you can go to the DMZ and you could theoretically go into the country, but only if you're supervised. How was that for you?
Yeah. So I actually I was in China back then, and I was doing some project for my master thesis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had a really good friend, and that friend is always like up for some crazy ideas. And when I was in Beijing, actually, I realized like, oh, actually, I'm very close to North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
So I did some research to see if it actually was possible. And it was possible. There are like different tour operators,
Mm-hmm.
most of them actually based in Beijing,
Okay.
and they offer different tours because
Yeah.
just to go there on your own, like that's impossible. You have
Yeah.
to go with some kind of tour agency,
Yeah.
and there are a couple of them. But there's one quite good one that's in Beijing. So
Yeah.
I called my friend. I said like, how about going to North Korea? And he immediately like was so hyped that
Yeah, that's cool.
within a day I think we just arranged everything.
Uh-huh.
So actually my answer, like people always ask me like, is it difficult to get into it? And I would say actually it was the most easiest travel I ever had because you
Mhm.
just pay the tour agent
Mm-hmm.
and they arrange everything. Like you don't have to, because it's a fixed tour arrangement, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to bother about like booking a hotel because they already do that. You don't have to bother about like finding a restaurant because that's already in the tour.
Yeah.
So every day you have like a clear plan.
Yeah.
So you just pay
You just
pay
follow
the
the
fee, and they even arrange the visa and all that stuff for you. So
Okay.
that was super easy. I think it was the easiest holiday I ever had. Yeah.
Okay. And what year was that?
So that was back in 2014.
Okay. Do you think now, because of the war and COVID and everything, it might be more difficult to get in, or do you think it's still about the same?
I believe that actually I'm still, because I'm just very curious still about what's going on in North Korea. So I'm still subscribed to the newsletter from the tour agency.
Okay.
And I heard they want to do a new marathon this year. And usually it's like around the birthday of, I believe it was Kim Jong-il or one of the Kims, the notorious Kims. Whenever it's a birthday, that's like a celebration in North Korea. And then they kind of, on that occasion, they have a marathon.
Okay.
And they used to do that every year, so it was like an international marathon. I saw, I think a few months ago that they planned this trip, but they had to cancel it again because North Korea kind of canceled it. So every year it's very and also during our time it was very uncertain because there's always something.
Yeah.
At that time it was like a lot of tensions with South Korea.
Yeah.
Because of that they kind of canceled. They almost canceled it, but we were quite lucky. And then COVID came, and I think since COVID, North Korea has been struggling too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the border has been opened since then. I think they are back to thinking about opening it again.
Yeah.
Because also what I must emphasize with those kind of tours is that it is kind of a cash cow for the North Korean government as well. It's kind of understandable why they do this because they just see it as kind of a business opportunity to make some extra money on the side because they're kind of in need of that as well. Which explains why they would open up their country for just to get some extra revenue. So I think the main rationale behind this is mostly economic.
Okay.
Why they're like opening up.
I actually dug up a bunch of crazy facts about North Korea, so I'm curious to see if you've heard of these.
Yeah, sure.
And so, by the way, everything I say you can Google. So there are a lot of petty things. I actually found some from the BBC News, the petty side of diplomacy, where just North and South Korea, they have little things that they do to each other to just piss the other side off. And one of them was there's actually a flagpole that was built in the 1980s in South Korea that was 97 meters high right at the border. So in a response, North Korea, they responded with a 160 meter high flagpole at the border, just to be like, our flag is higher than yours. And then they also have a village, and in North Korea it's called Peace Village, but in South Korea they call it the Propaganda Village. And it's a village that's right at the border in North Korea to the side of South Korea. And actually a lot of the buildings are empty and they're just painted on windows. And there are apparently some actors running around playing like happy life, everything's fine over here, just to give like the impression of, everything's fine. We're not so strict here. And then there's a couple of other crazy things with loudspeakers. So in North Korea, it's incredibly illegal to consume any other content than North Korean content. So even just K-pop music or videos, you can go to prison or even get killed for consuming such content. So South Korea has huge loudspeakers on the border, and they play just K-pop super loud, so the North Koreans can hear it. So in response, North Koreans built, they also got a ton of loudspeakers, but these are apparently not as good. So in South Korea, you couldn't hear the music from North Korea, but the point is just that the North Koreans can't hear the South Korean music because the North Koreans are just making noise to like block out the K-pop. And there is also a thing called balloon propaganda, where both borders have a history of launching propaganda balloons at each other. So it's like a balloon filled with either biscuits and chocolates and also leaflets where they have information what's going on either side. So the South Koreans are basically telling North Koreans there is life outside of North Korea and it can be good, because since in North Korea they only know what they're told, right? So it's really, they live in a bubble and they have only one channel from the government. Everything is controlled. They have no internet as we know it. And so it's understandable that they couldn't even like imagine life outside of the border. So that's why the South Koreans try to give them just an idea of what's going on the other side. And then what else did I find? There is only a certain number of haircuts that are allowed, and everything else is publicly shamed and is really illegal. There is really no individuality allowed. There's this saying, if a nail sticks out, you hammer it down. So just to make it very clear that that's not an option. And really anything Western, even if it's, Western meaning anything that's not North Korean, can end in months to years in prison camps. And prison camps are usually also end in death even. There's just one story that I'm not sure if that's true. The rest you can Google, but there's this one thing. I heard that there was a case of a house was burning down and the mother ran in to save the children. And then she had to go to prison because she saved her children instead of the picture of the dictator. And then she had to go to prison for that. Insane. And then I don't know if you've ever heard from Yeomi Park. Yeah. She's a North Korean woman who actually managed to escape North Korea through really crazy. She also has a couple of books where she explains it in detail, but it was insanely difficult to get out, and now she's telling the story of what's actually going on. So definitely recommend if you're interested in that. And she has this story where they said that math was made up by white men. They said they proved it wrong by saying if you put one drop of water in your hand and you put another drop of water in your hand, it's not two, it's just one bigger one. That means 1 + 1 is not 2, ergo math is bullshit. That was their entire reasoning. So
interesting logic.
Yeah. It's just really insane what's going on over there. It's so crazy also for me thinking about it. Like, we're here in South Korea and life is normal, I would say. I mean, we don't have any restrictions like that at all here. But it's crazy to think just a few kilometers up north, it's hell on earth. Yeah. It's so different. Yeah.
The interesting thing that I found was that because also people have asked me often like, how is life in North Korea, or what was your impression? And of course, like the biggest disclaimer is always that it's kind of true that they want you to see what they will show you, right? Like it's a fixed kind of tour that you will get, and you will see the main things. So whenever you also speak with someone else who has been to North Korea, you've always been to the same kind of museums, and there's like this war museum that you always go to. And then there's this certain village that they will take you to. It's like kind of some spa resort. So it's like always, it's like the usual kind of portfolio of different attractions that they have made for you. Like there's another tower in stuff like that. But aside from that, it's like I was surprised by how normal life also kind of feels, because in the end it's just like millions of people living there, and sure, they live in a very like absurd political kind of environment, but then back at the end of the day, they're still like normal people who still wanna, who live their daily lives. So that was for me actually also quite absurd, that even though the whole country is so absurd, that actually on a day-to-day basis it seems like people just trying to make a living and just try to get by. And of course we don't know how much they actually know or how much they're being told. And maybe how much they reflect on whether their life is actually normal or whether that's absurd compared to other countries, because they probably don't have much to compare with, right? Because all the information is just being controlled. So they might just think that they have the most normal life ever, and when they see us as like tourists flocking in, they think like, oh, that they like, we feel sorry for them because maybe they live in absurd living conditions. So that's super interesting. That it's just like, it seems like just normal people trying to get by.
It's really just, they only know what they're told. And I also saw the story that since golf is not really a thing there, the dictator could just be like, yeah, I'm awesome at golf, and the first time I played golf I did 14 hole-in-ones, and he's known as a golf legend, and everybody just has to go with it, and you could never speak anything against him.
I believe it was also there was I don't know, there's like, I think there was one time that North Korea actually participated in the World Cup.
And soccer?
They did qualify. I think it was like around 2000 or something like that. And they had one game against Brazil. And I think the outcome was like 7-1 or something. They got like smashed, but they scored, but they managed to get one goal against Brazil, which is kind of an achievement already. But then apparently the edits of that whole game just show that one goal, and then they claimed that they won from Brazil, and they've kind of dominated the world soccer. So that was that's an interesting thing as well. They're very selective in what they want you to show. But on that note, I feel like if you can see, sure, like they arranged kind of a tour, but there were moments where you can actually see through that. So I became quite close with one of the two leaders. He was like a guy similar age as me.
Was he North Korean?
He was North Korean, and he was like a tour guide. But we often just like chilled in the back of the bus because we sat together and I was talking. And actually, I was because I brought my laptop, I was even showing him my life in South Korea, because just that year before, I think I was in South Korea. So I was showing him some pictures, and you could see he was very defensive. But I think both he and I understand that he wanted to say more, but he couldn't really, because that might get him in trouble. But I think through like my interactions with him, and we established some kind of friendship. I also felt a bit sorry for him, because he probably knew more, but maybe also he can't really talk about that. So it's a very tricky situation for everyone to be in. And I also didn't want to provoke him, because that might put him in risk too.
Yeah, but it's just, I can't even imagine it, that your entire life is dictated by fear. I mean, you have to be so careful what you do and what you say, and that's got to be a terrible way of life. All right, let's switch to something less depressing.
I did finish the marathon though, so that was a personal achievement for me.
Have you ever done one before?
I think that was my first half marathon. I should say half marathon, because a full marathon I would have never survived. I think it was the first like semi-marathon that I did. But I was, as I mentioned, I was in Beijing before, and Beijing, the air pollution back then was horrible. So I tried to train a bit, but I just couldn't like practice, and I was a bit overweight as well. So it was like the most physical challenge I think I will ever encounter in my life. Actually, my knee is still hurting from that experience because I was like, there was just too much weight on my knees. But I did manage to complete it without actually stopping on the way. And the nice thing was that there was like a stadium where you end. So once you like run into the stadium for the last couple of 100 meters, then that's quite a nice feeling that you get. But of course, the whole idea of doing this marathon in North Korea it's bizarre. And another thing that is always like, I think you should be conscious if any of the listeners are thinking of going to North Korea, just be aware that actually also by actually going there, you're kind of contributing to the regime as well, because actually some part of your money that you spend is paid. Sure, it's paid for the tour agency, but then they also pay the North Koreans. So that's something that's always like, I think most people who've been to North Korea, especially afterwards, that kind of thought sinks in.
Yeah.
That I would advise people to at least reflect on that, whether you're okay with actually subsidizing the regime with some small amount of money, because that's actually de facto also what you're doing by going to North Korea. Aside from that, it's really fascinating country. Obviously, the most fascinating country I've been able to visit.
Yeah. How was the race? Was it like more or less flat, or did you have a lot of
I would say for a Dutch person, it's like the Netherlands with having any significant mountain. It was pretty easy because it wasn't like wasn't a lot of mountains. It was pretty okay.
Okay.
So for running a marathon, because I've done another one after that back in the Netherlands, which is like on the beach. I would say
on the sand.
Yeah, it was like the first 7 kilometers are on sand.
Okay.
It's like a lot of wind
and on sand.
Yeah, the first time I ran, it was like the sand was very. I'm not sure how to say it in English, but it was just very loose. So you lose just so much energy from just running. And the first 7K are over sand. So once you leave that sand, you're already really exhausted. And then you realize you have to do 14 more K. So yeah.
So that was also a half marathon.
That was a half marathon as well.
So that's how much is that? 21? Or
that's 21. So the full one is 42.
Yeah.
42 is like. I think the fun thing about doing a half marathon is that you can still do it quite untrained. You probably will be able to do it as well. Just be careful for your knees. But doing a full one, like you have to be trained. Yeah. But if your physique is quite okay, then you can just do it for fun. You can just start a half marathon tomorrow. Yeah. If you really want to, but it's gonna be painful though.
Yeah. It's a mental thing as well to keep through all the way.
Have you ever done like a marathon?
So I mean, in the military, I've done a lot of marches. So just walk. I mean, very long. It's the longest I've done so far is 101 kilometers, but that's walking. I mean, it's still a long distance, but it's definitely still different from running.
Yeah.
And ironically, with the knee pain, my very first 50-kilometer march was actually harder than my 100-kilometer march.
Yeah.
Because after the first 50, I had terrible knee pain for months, and then I was in the NCO. That's when you were in the school to be a sergeant. You do another one, but this 50 is a lot harder in terms of ups and downs. And after this one, my knee pain was gone.
Wow.
So maybe the solution is just the same thing again.
Yeah.
But no, I've never run a marathon before, but it's definitely on my bucket list.
Maybe the Pyongyang marathon if North Korea allows for it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a story to tell. I mean, how many people can say that they've been in North Korea?
Yeah. It was an interesting time back then.
Yeah.